Hello everybody. The Policy Committee of the Liberal Party of Western Australia has decided to organize a discussion about information warfare and its effect on Western democracy. They have decided to bring to us a Republican campaign strategist to enlighten us about the ramifications of information warfare and its effect on our democracy. Let's sit back, relax, and enjoy this discussion.
Disinformation, election interference, cyber attacks. These are gray zone tactics that the United States and others have struggled to counter.
Can you introduce yourself to us and the reason why you are here in Western Australia?
Sure. My name is Ron Nearing. I'm the Director of International Programs for the Leadership Institute, which is an American NGO. Tonight we're going to talk a little bit about information warfare and how it applies through recent events.
And information warfare, what are the disadvantages of information warfare to our democracy?
Well, certainly we saw in 2016 in the American presidential election, there was an active effort on the part of the Russian government to influence American public opinion and to influence our elections. And so Western democracies need to fully appreciate and understand the threat that this poses, that hostile foreign governments could choose to interfere in our democratic process.
And how can we counter the effect of information warfare?
Well, number one, our governments have to be aware that this is a threat, and voters or everyday citizens need to be aware that the information that you're seeing online may not be completely accurate. We should be a little more skeptical of information before we share it on Facebook or retweet something on Twitter, particularly when it's very sensationalistic or very negative.
What is the origin of information warfare?
Well, certainly what we've seen is with the advent of the internet and social media, it allows for hostile forces to really use old tactics that they've been using in the past, like propaganda and trying to mislead people, and it weaponizes that because it allows people to bypass the traditional media filters and just get information directly to voters. And if they're disguising themselves to be actual citizens of a country like Australia or the United States, then all of a sudden people are sharing this information, then they wind up being fraudulently duped into doing the bidding of a hostile foreign power without even knowing it.
You are a campaign strategist for the Republican Party. Do you see yourself as a propagandist?
No, certainly not. I think that the major difference that you see, political campaigns can get tough and so on, but what you saw on the part of the Russians is that they disguised themselves, creating literally thousands of fake accounts, pretending to be Americans and pretending to share the views of American citizens. That's not transparent. That's a form of fraud, and we have to be aware of that.
How are we sure it was the Russians who are perpetrating this information warfare? Because we've got the North Koreans, we've got the Chinese who also can do this.
Yeah, this was very well established, not only by American intelligence, but by the intelligence agencies of our allies, as well as private cybersecurity firms who have experience in going up against these Russian entities, which involve extensions of the Russian FSB and the GRU, which is Russia's intelligence agencies. They are very specific tactics and strategies that were used on the part of these people that are exactly identical to what the Russians would use.
Do you think some Americans are also part of this information warfare?
Well, the activities that we saw the Russians undertake was really directed by them and carried out by them. We are not aware of any Americans who were involved.
After the election, it emerged Russia was behind a vast amount of fake news. The FBI and Congress are investigating if Russia colluded with the Trump campaign. Facebook uncovered thousands of messages posted from Russian-linked accounts, which reached 126 million Americans.
Last year, we heard about the problem with Cambridge Analytica buying some information from Facebook. Is that also not part of information warfare?
Well, that's a very different form of concern. That had nothing to do with people disguising themselves, creating hundreds of fake Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram accounts pretending to be, someone else. There were certainly privacy issues that were raised by what Cambridge Analytica did. That's part of the reason why they're out of business.
So have you got any message for the viewers out there about this forum?
Sure. I think people should be aware that the information that they sometimes see on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and social media might not be coming from a source that they trust. So everybody should look very carefully at the source of the information. Is it coming from some fly-by-night website that no one's ever heard of, or is it coming from a legitimate news outlet? That's the first filter that we should be applying to what we see on social media.
We got a lot of viewers out there who look up to you as a role model. What message have you got for them?
Well, I think that one of the advantages of living in a democracy like Australia is that people can get involved in politics. If people don't like what's happening in the federal government or the state government, they can get involved, and people should.
Do you think information warfare is affecting our values as a democracy?
Certainly what we saw on the part of the Russians, and what we'll talk a little bit about tonight, was an effort to play Americans against one another, to really try to move people to the extremes and then try to get them to be very, very hostile to one another. The Russians have identified for a long time what many of the seams are in our society, which they can try to tug at to try to pull people apart. And I think that speaks to the need that we need to have a little more civility in our public life.
Massive data breaches like the hack of 22 million records from the Office of Personnel Management have been tied to state-supported organizations and individuals. Also increasing are state-sponsored attacks against private companies, like North Korea's cyber attack on Sony.
Can you please give us another example, apart from the Russians, of people perpetrating information warfare?
Well, sure. There was the case of Sony Pictures, which was hacked in 2014 by the North Koreans. And this was in response to a movie that was produced by Sony. It was a comedy. It was actually not even a very good comedy. But the country of North Korea hacked into an American company and then sought to destroy that company. So that's an example of information warfare being used by a foreign country other than Russia.
What do you want the people of Australia to take out of this forum?
I think the first thing is let's be aware that because we live in a democracy and because we have this new thing called social media that has really become very, very popular, it's not just being used by a couple people but by many people, that we have to be aware that not everything that we see on the internet is true. Lots of conspiracy theories, lots of things that aren't true, and we should subject that to a little more scrutiny.
Do you think our print and television are also part of this information warfare?
Well, certainly if issues are pushed through social media and then they're picked up on by traditional media, then that has an even bigger effect. So traditional reporters are somewhat susceptible to what they see online as well. They're just like everyday people. And so if there's false information or fraudulent information being spread online, that has a potential to affect mainstream media. That's why journalists have to subject their journalistic training and use that to filter out fact from fiction.
Thanks for talking to us, Ron.
My pleasure.
I am Tony ETC, reporting for Undercurrent.